Thanks so much for being here. This is a really neat discussion, building clean tech innovation ecosystems. So as you know, cities and urban regions are the source of many of today's mobility and environmental problems, but they can also be the ideal testing grounds to develop innovative solutions. So we're here today to talk about how government agencies and regulators can work in partnership with private investors, innovators, and research institutions to create ecosystems that foster and fund the next breakthroughs in clean mobility. So before we get into the discussions, why don't we have each panelist briefly introduce themselves and begin by telling the audience about their experiences and working to develop the clean tech innovation ecosystem as it relates to transportation and mobility. And we'll start with Hilary.
Thanks, Bryan. Hi, everyone. My name is Hilary Travis, and I work at Foresight, which is Canada's Cleantech Accelerator. I like to say plus plus because we do more than acceleration programming now. And I'm our director of our BC Net Zero Innovation Network, which is a clustering or capacity building initiative that we have support through Pacifican, as well as the Emily through the BC government and industry players. And it's really about bringing the ecosystem together to work towards our net zero and also our 2030 goals here within the province. It's really about bringing together innovators, industry, investors, Indigenous partners, and government and academia to work together on these actual projects that are going to decarbonize. And I'm excited to share today that we are moving on our fourth cluster, which is going to be in the transportation space, hence why I'm here. And we're going to be focusing on enabling low carbon and zero emission vehicle technologies, smart mobility and logistics, and really how do we get all of those different partners together to work on the projects that will lead to the decarbonization that is needed in this sector.
That's great, Hilary. And for those of you that are out of town and maybe not familiar with Vancouver, we are a port city and actually Canada's largest port and North America's third largest port. So the movement of goods and transportation is a big industry here and a big part of our economy. So really great to hear the news. Congratulations.
Thanks. And I'll just add that we're sector agnostic. So looking at marine, air, trucking, all of the different parts of the supply chain.
Okay, Leanne.
Hi, my name is Leanne Buhler. I work on BCAA's Strategic Ventures team as a senior manager. BCAA's Strategic Ventures team is like a corporate innovation lab. We work to bring new products and services to British Columbians to stay relevant and provide value to the province. I've had a pleasure of working on a lot of sort of urban transportation projects. I lead the development and implementation of Evolve e-bike share, which is the extension of Evo car share, so bringing e-bikes and other micromobility to the province. I've also worked on some cool projects in partnership with TransLink, Moto, and Mobi, the Shared Mobility Compass Card, which is a mobility aggregator to, again, make it more convenient for people to get around the province and use our public and shared transportation options. And I've also been involved in some of the early stage development of a pilot that never took off, but it was an autonomous vehicle pilot at UBC. So exciting to have this conversation because all of our projects are really made possible through partnerships and working with municipalities and other groups in the community. So looking forward to the chat.
Okay, just a show of hands, how many people are an EVO member like me? Yeah. And again, just a plug for Vancouver, there's no other city in North America that has adopted shared car sharing like Vancouver has. It's just been remarkably successful here. Okay, David.
Great. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be part of this panel. My name is David Agosti. I am the Director of Parking and Sustainable Mobility Services at Simon Fraser University, which is a really long title to put on my business card. Which basically means I'm just responsible for everything commuting at our university, whether that's parking, whether it's transit, whether it's our community shuttle, whether it's micromobility. I've been doing this for a while, and I'm also responsible for SFU's 2025 sustainability goals in relation to Scope 3 emissions, where by 2025, we are looking to reduce our GHG emissions from commuting by 25%. So quite a large task for us. I think one of the things that I really noticed about this panel title and that I'm excited about, because I come from a consumer behavior background, is really that ecosystems piece, right? So we're talking about hardware, we're talking about software, we're talking about data analysis, we're talking about just surveying and collecting information and determining where consumer behavior will lead and what we can do to lead it in the right direction in terms of sustainability and transportation. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, David. And again, for those of you that are from out of town, Simon Fraser University is tremendously engaged with our local stakeholders here in helping us solve all sorts of challenges through all kinds of programs, actually. And SFU is actually acknowledged as the most engaged university anywhere in Canada. So just doing great work out there in the community. Not the ivory towers that we once thought of. Okay, Elisabeth.
Thank you so much, Bryan. It's an absolute pleasure to be here this morning. I had a wonderful time at the conference last year, and I'm really glad to be here again at Motivate 2023. So my name is Elisabeth Charmley. I am a Senior Manager of West Coast Maritime Initiatives with the province of British Columbia. I work in the Trade and Industry Development Division, specifically with the Ministry for Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation. I have a long history with transportation, specifically with maritime and deep sea shipping transportation. I have a technical background. I'm an engineer, specifically a naval architect. And in the last 10 years, it feels like a previous lifetime ago, I had worked for Seaspan Ship Management, who is the world's largest container ship lessor. And during my time there, I saw the fleet grow from 75 vessels operating globally to 138. And then at that point in time, we had 70 ships on new build order. My role there was to support the fleet in continued operations on a global scale to encourage transportation. Nearing the end of my time there, I didn't really know it was going to be the end, but I met an economic developer who's also on the stage here with me, and he asked me, what is industry doing when it comes to maritime decarbonization? And I said, I don't know, because I work globally, but let's start asking around here people in our province. I'm a fairly social engineer. Let's figure this out and have conversations and see what people here in the province of British Columbia, how they want to get to zero. And we convened our first meeting, and we had overwhelming response from the BC maritime and shipping transportation industry that they wanted to establish a type of coalition or a hub to focus specifically on decarbonization. And that's how we formed the Vancouver Maritime Centre for Climate. I was there for about a year and a half as a co-founder, executive director, and chair of the board. I still hold those titles, but the organization is currently an informal not-for-profit, and we're mobilizing through contractors and our members to really realize the outcomes through our green shipping strategy and our pilot projects and commercialization program, Operation Flagship. And our members also work through the work groups to tackle specific joint industry projects together. Lastly, it's been, I think, about 4.5 months now. In the fall this last year, the province of British Columbia approached me, and they were interested in forming a department, a branch of the government, to help support the regional industry, again, in the maritime sector in terms of economic development. So I took on that role, and I am now Senior Manager, West Coast Maritime Initiatives, and we just launched our BC Maritime Industries Strategy, along with the formation of the West Coast Maritime Office, which we are implementing, and I am leading that implementation.
Okay, so what a diverse group of panelists, everything from the maritime and marine sectors to technology accelerators to shared mobility to academia. So we're going to hear some diverse experiences. And that's my next question is, so in your experiences in helping develop the Greater Vancouver, clean mobility or clean transportation ecosystems, what's been some of your biggest challenges that you've been facing? Yeah, go ahead, Hilary.
I think one of the biggest challenges, which is also a really great opportunity for initiatives and groups such as ourselves, is a lot of people and companies and organizations are quite busy. You have profit margins and all these different things to focus on. And so, understanding what's going on in, another company or organization or across the whole region is really difficult to do, and it's not just in the transportation sector. Silos exist everywhere. And so how do you get and share information between different groups and work together? And I think it really comes down to capacity building and getting everybody in the room to have conversations like this, or to talk to the different groups and then connect them when possible, for co-opetition instead of competition, and work on those kind of next steps towards decarbonization. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in that bringing people together space.
I think on our side, and I heard it a lot this morning, is speed. So maybe sort of similar in terms of resourcing and having the capacity to move projects and move innovation forward. When I say speed, oftentimes what we're up against is really large organizations, global companies that may have deeper pockets and more people to move things forward. And oftentimes what we're experiencing is groups in BC we have tons of cool innovators. We've got funding, we've got support through the government, we've got pilot frameworks, but it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy to sort of move projects through the pipeline. And by the time we're kind of getting to fruition and getting to implementation, sometimes the timing is past where there's that opportunity, and we are seeing other companies come in who can move quicker and be more agile. So I think that's the biggest sort of challenge we're often up against, especially in shared mobility, especially in urban spaces. So, I mean, it's great that there's companies coming in and doing it faster, but in sort of the spirit of supporting and promoting Canadian and British Columbian organizations and businesses, that's probably the greatest challenge that we're up against a lot of the time.
So I think in my case, only about 25% of the time do I deal with transportation professionals. The other 75% of the time, I'm dealing with commuters, or I'm dealing with the bureaucracy within the university, so on and so forth. So I think the biggest challenge that I face is unrealistic expectations. And what I mean by that is everyone seems to be searching for that one silver bullet. And instead, what I'm trying to say to them is, hey, don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. I seem to talk in catchphrases all the time now. I quite like that one. In terms of this panel, I think one of the most important words for me is ecosystems. So, I think the biggest challenge is people tend to get stuck, because I mentioned that my responsibility is reducing our commuting emissions by 25% by 2025. And the question I always get, is that thing going to do it? And the answer is no. It's always no. Right? There's no one thing that's going to accomplish that. So I think that's the biggest challenge for me right now, is explaining to people we need to have an ecosystem. We need to implement a suite of solutions. And together, that suite of solutions, through those ecosystems, through those partnerships, will enable us to overcome those challenges and meet our goals. So, bad news, challenge; good news, solutions.
I hate to do this to you, Bryan, but can you ask the question again? I feel like I'm listening to a game of telephone. I'm like, those are all really good answers, but what was the question again?
Yeah, just in your experience, your personal experience in helping the community here develop, the clean tech or clean mobility ecosystem, what's been your biggest challenges you've been facing so far?
So I want to reiterate some of what my colleagues up on the stage said, and I think it's people underestimate the number of conversations that need to be had before we reach a decision. And when you think about, in your experience, how many conversations you've had with another individual or another company before you actually do business together, I think I Googled it one time, not to get too nerdy, and someone can Google it again for me now and correct me, but I remember it was like about 13. So when you're thinking about the number of conversations that you need to have to get to that point where you actually sign a contract or implement something, that's a fair number. And I wouldn't say that we need to shorten that number of conversations, but I think we need to act deliberately and with purpose to make sure that we're having them and we're understanding the challenges that companies are facing in terms of, greening up and cleaning their transportation, and make those conversations really intentional so that we can have outcomes from them. And then another part of that is in the marine industry specifically, the biggest challenge that they're facing is uptake of alternative fuels. Because as much as they optimize the ships to increase energy efficiency, the real only way to get to zero is the adoption of future clean fuels. And right now, when ship owners are looking to renew their fleet here in our province, they don't have many options on anything other than, say, like biodiesels or these types of fuels, and LNG. And then if they're looking at methanol, ammonia, other options, those just don't exist. So I'm, as I said, very recently a bureaucrat. You can ask me anything, I'll give you a very honest answer. And so I think a role that government can play as part of this, and I see it when I'm engaging with industry and those facing these challenges, is we need to be facilitating and convening the right people around the table. And this ties back into what I spoke about having really deliberate and intentional conversations to realize a polyfuel future, because that's really where we're headed. And we heard that here, that it's not just going to be one solution or one fuel that's going to change transportation. It's going to be many different types for many different applications.
A polyfuel future, you heard it here first. So Elisabeth, why don't we start with you again. So just now that we've heard quite a wide array of challenges from the panelists, I'd like to hear more about the successes, even just components along that journey of trying to achieve your goals or objectives. Could you share one or two successes that you've noted so far?
Yeah, for sure. I would say VMCC, actually the not-for-profit that was founded, is a huge success. And when I was considering this question in preparation for this panel, I thought about what that journey's looked like and where the organization is today in terms of the member engagement and the conversations that they're having. When I was working at C-SPAN, I would, a couple times a year reach out to all my other ship owners and ask them what they were doing, when it came to various aspects of vessel operation. I actually had an Excel spreadsheet, and I would call up, this guy at Grimaldi Lines in Italy. I would call Paul at Maersk. I would call everybody, and we would talk for 20 minutes, half an hour, and say, hey, what paint are you buying? What bulbous bow optimization have you done? What new engine derating are you happening on board? It's kind of like when you want to buy a new table saw or something for your house, you might go over to your neighbor, knock on the door and say, hey, I saw you using this in your garage. How do you find it? And so I was doing a lot of that. And when I stepped away from that role and into VMCC, I kind of assumed that everybody was doing that same thing, and I discovered that they weren't. And I think it was Hilary who mentioned the siloing that happens, that you get specific people in industry working together, sharing knowledge, and then it just ends, it doesn't go anywhere. And the dissemination of knowledge and information to encourage broad-scale uptake of the technologies that we need to change transportation to be emissions-free happens through organization and clusters like the Vancouver Maritime Centre for Climate. They really bring the right people around the table to have those conversations, like the utilities providers, the ship owners, the innovators, the regulators, because those are the repetitive conversations that we need to be having.
Okay, so leveraging the network effect, that's great. David?
Yeah, I think two keywords are partnerships and collaboration. I'm working for a university. We love our Venn diagrams. Unfortunately, we don't have a slide up on that. But I think that, if you look at, say, policy and partnership, and then you have discussions, and then you have innovation, and then you circle back and you work on that continuous wheel of improvement to what you're trying to achieve. So, one example for us is EV charging. We've constantly tweaked our policy on where the chargers are, who can use them under what circumstances, and so on and so forth. We happen to be a charge point house. We flow the most electrons out of any other charge point installation in North America, I believe, certainly out of all the other universities in North America. On average, I'm flowing electrons 11 hours a day. I have some machines that, believe it or not, are flowing electrons 16 hours a day. And that's because of how we're tweaking that policy in terms of it's not 100% fleet use only, it's not 100% work use only, so on and so forth. But having said that, I'm going to take over your role a little bit and pass it on to my partner next to me, because we have an example of partnership and collaboration and success that we're working on right now.
That's great. I was just going to ask you, could you name a partner? So take it away.
Yeah, so I I would say partnerships and collaborations are incredibly important to all of the work that we do. And early on in my time on our team, I realized there's very little that we can do independently, and we really do need to rely on partners. So the thing that David is referring to is for us, bringing shared mobility, especially micromobility, it's highly regulated through municipalities. It's really hard to find opportunities to try different things and explore that space. And so we've been able to create a great relationship and a great partnership, and shortly we'll ideally have some e-bikes up on SFU campus in Burnaby to solve a lot of the challenges that students have up there, students and residents of the city up there as well, to bring micromobility and to encourage active and sustainable transportation. And so we can't do that alone. Obviously, SFU can't do that alone. We're bringing the municipality into the picture. We're bringing other partners into the picture. But it's just the start of a really cool relationship and a cool partnership to do something different and to try and innovate a little bit quicker.
Yeah, what a great example.
Yeah, and if I could tie that in a little bit for the audience, talking about bureaucracy and challenges, when we were investigating this initiative, there was myself around the table in terms of SFU, but there was also our facilities department, our campus security, our traffic safety, our risk department, our student residences. I'm probably missing somebody in there. And they raised a lot of concerns, and what we said was, wait a minute, take a step back. Are those concerns with this particular micromobility initiative, or are those just general concerns about cycling on campus? And if they are general concerns about cycling on campus, this isn't a challenge, this is a solution because of that ecosystem. Because now we're going to get not just the e-bikes in terms of the hardware, we're going to get the data ecosystem that is going to tell us things like, this is where people ride. So let's either make them not ride there if it's unsafe, or let's improve that infrastructure. So, sorry for ping-ponging a little bit there, but I think that's challenge, solution, innovation, more solution. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this partnership, and I think it's going to be really successful, not just for the micromobility initiative itself, but for the university community as a whole, both the operations side, the students, and the residential community we have living on campus.
Yeah, that's great. Hilary, how about from your perspective, success stories?
Yeah, so we're a newer initiative that launched in February, and we're just getting going on some projects. So hopefully if I get invited to come back next year, I'll be able to share some success stories from that. But even just in the knowledge sharing and bringing together, pulling us away from the Metro Van region, we did a consultation in the East Kootenays and the West Kootenays, and for you who are not from British Columbia, that's the north or southeast part of the province. And we brought together quite a few different districts and municipal governments, and we realized they all had very similar transportation issues, that they were all dealing with the exact same problems, but they weren't talking to each other. So now we've identified a problem and are able to kind of hopefully bring them together and look for some of those solutions. So even just collaboration, breaking down those silos and bringing everybody together. Groups that you think would talk to each other aren't always. So I think there's success in just bringing people together like this event even.
Okay, thanks for that. So, as innovators in our community, and I'm talking mostly about Metro Vancouver, but it would be synonymous with any metropolitan region, really anywhere in North America and probably Europe as well, as we move from incubation to acceleration to commercialization, pilots or demonstration projects become much more critical to helping those companies gain market share, or even just securing that really significant first contract. So many will say that this can be the catalyst for, to implementing and at scale down the road. And you may have heard some of, the previous innovators at the pitch panel, indicate that. But my question really is it too late for pilots given the climate emergency that we're in? Because we know it takes a long time to go from incubation all the way through to scaling a company that can have a real impact. So we're running out of time. Shouldn't we be dropping this sort of business as usual approach in the innovation ecosystem? and moving towards, wholesale, rapid adoption, especially, if the technology or the solution is already proven. It already works. We know it works. Why are we doing pilots? Who wants to take that on?
I'll jump in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about this. There's probably very little that I think we could do without calling it a pilot. So maybe it's a little bit of semantics and a bit of a signaling to our partners about what's the commitment of this project or of this initiative. A pilot is, when you think about it, it's maybe reversible, it's lower risk, smaller. And when we're talking about partnerships and all of the people that we're involved with from a regulatory, from government, from industry, Elisabeth just said 13 conversations. It takes a lot of work just to get something over the line, even if a small amount. But really that's been able to give us a lot of permission to play at a bigger scale. That being said, I think that the point is really well heard, that a pilot is only is so limited, and in a climate emergency, what are we doing to further that initiative? So I think the sort of approach that we take to pilots is being really clear and crisp about what we're trying to prove in that short period of time, keeping the pilot a pilot, not just an ongoing development of project incremental improvement, and then having a clear idea about what scaling up looks like and what those trigger points are to get there. So, using a pilot for the purpose of making sure we're all on board in those early days, but being really clear about what it could be and also about what may not be.
So first of all, I think if anyone from my communications team was here, they'd be very proud of me for staying on message, because I'm going to reiterate the words of ecosystems and no silver bullet. Pilots are extremely important. To the point, though, are they really pilots? And what I mean by that is, you may have a project that has 10 steps to that project. If you're the province of BC, Metro Vancouver, City of Vancouver, on something like micromobility, but you can quote unquote pilot that with Simon Fraser University. And then when someone who has a larger reach is looking at something like that, they really don't have to start at step 1. They can start at step 4 of that 10-step process. So, maybe pilot project needs a different word, but I think certainly the way we've been initiating those projects, the way we've been enacting those projects, and the way our partnerships have not just been with our project team, but holistically with stakeholders in the region, I think really means pilot projects are absolutely necessary.
From the maritime perspective, and I'm not sure what it's like for land-based transportation or even aviation, but there's, international bodies like the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, that has been driving decarbonization of the industry for a long time. So ship owners have been, for many years now, addressing implementation of technologies to get to zero. But again, the next step that they need to take is this implementation of alternative fuels. And some of those technologies exist already. Some of them don't. And when you think about managing risk around using those technologies, I think piloting is still a very important and necessary step. But as part of that, one thing we can do to accelerate the impact of piloting is have stakeholders come together and share the learnings and information from that pilot project. So where they might be sharing cost of implementation of that technology, or the R&D or the feasibility studies, or looking into the safety components of using that technology on the water, that would certainly help accelerate and help us when we're in this a climate crisis. And then another key component of that, I think, is when we're uptaking these technologies for the initial piloting or even implementation on board, the capital cost can be the barrier to broad-scale implementation of those technologies. And I really think that's where, not to put too fine a point on myself, but where government can play an important role is helping to financially de-risk the larger uptake of those technologies for industry. So once the piloting is complete and the knowledge is disseminated and shared, and there's understanding, and we can move that forward, that there is support for industry to accelerate that uptake. So that way, we're saying like we're running out of time, but actually we are out of time. It's no longer climate change. The climate has changed. It's happened. We see it here all the time in our province.
Yeah, and I echo a lot of what these guys are saying, but on the technical side, you do still need to have some pilots to prove it out so that we're not mass adopting something that's not going to work. However, we are out of time, as you've both mentioned, and we really need to get mass adoption for these technologies. And so that's where knowledge sharing is so important, and where, especially on the municipal side, there's an opportunity around procurement for different municipalities across countries, provinces. Even in this area in Metro Vancouver, there's opportunities, and that already exists. Once someone has piloted it, then they should be sharing the information, and not everybody else needs to pilot it. They can implement it, and yes, each have different city sizes and other issues, but there's really a great opportunity to create marketplaces of which procurement information can be shared, and that de-risks it for other municipalities. But it also can happen on the industry side, and the challenges that happen in the maritime sector. I talked to the forest sector and the mining sector, and it's the exact same challenges, so can they de-risk it for each other?
Yeah, well said. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but I just wanted to encourage people, if you have any questions, to come on up to the mic. We've only got about 7 minutes left. So now's a good time to ask questions of the panelists. And just to build on that, it is a long haul with municipalities, with regional governments and county governments as well. And, I'm trying to think about what you're mentioning. Almost sounds like a buyer's club or a cooperative. Why could we get all the universities together as a buyer's club, or could we get all the municipalities and regional governments together to form one buyer's club? And the idea, of course, is now you've got a significant purchase that you could put out. You would think that you would get some tremendous interest from the innovator community that would want to use that opportunity to really scale up that venture should they land that contract. But who wants to comment on that in their experience? Go ahead.
I'd love to respond to that. Yeah, I think that it sounds great, but when you start adding all of those people into the mix, that's when it really slows down. And that's the experience that we've had on a couple of cases where it's a lot of people trying to squeeze a square peg into a round hole of what their own individual bureaucracies or organizations have. And I think about, legal teams, and I think about policies and regulations of all these different organizations, and they never fit together. And I think the mobility aggregator that we're working on with TransLink and Moto and Mobi is a great example of that. We're all super motivated to move this project forward, but what's slowing us down is just the incompatibility of coming together and the governance part of that. And so, it's taken a lot of time, and it's taking a lot of time to move the project forward. So are we going to miss our opportunity? It's a great concept and a great organizations coming together. That's what we all want, but at the cost of speed and urgency.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So on the one hand, you have that significant opportunity from a purchasing point of view, but what you're saying is that's just too much engagement, which almost goes contrary to what we'd be thinking, given that the public is wanting more engagement these days, to be more involved. That's fascinating. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I think also when you talk about that, you're kind of post-pilot stage. So BCNet, for those of you who aren't in BC, is an organization similar to that. They just released some information to the university sector about putting out RFQs. I believe there was a presentation earlier talking about the low carbon fuel standard and carbon credits. But I'm going to shut myself up because I think I see someone standing at a microphone.
That's great.
Yeah, I just had a question where I've just heard that some people are planning to do pilot projects in the virtual world first, like building things virtually and using AI and all the new technologies. Is that something that would help move things along faster?
Sort of like digital twinning. You hear a lot about digital twinning as well as a great platform. Anyone want to take that?
I can say yes, for sure. It's something that I hear frequently when I'm talking with different operators, is that they want to see more, building of digital models to help them realize or estimate the emissions reductions, and they want to use it, to share that knowledge and use it on site. So yes, for sure, I think there's more need for that, and that can definitely help us accelerate.
Also on the logistics side, definitely in the transportation sector, there's a lot of opportunities to reduce emissions, just looking at the different modes and how they can work together.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there anyone here from Vancouver Airport Authority? Is there one person hiding over there? The reason I asked that question is I missed a presentation they were doing on, and I'm blanking on the name, but it was basically a virtualization of their airport operations. So we as a university are not there, but I think there definitely are some leaders in that space in terms of that virtualization and that study. I've just told you everything I know about YVR, but so I don't want to put words in their mouths, but hopefully I'll be able to touch base with them in the fall.
Yeah, I know about as much as you do, but I will say that is a real project. It's live, is my understanding, and as many of you in the room know, YVR has some of the most aggressive climate targets anywhere in the world, and so we're hopeful that digital twinning will help them achieve some of their goals and objectives, by 2030. So we've just got a couple of minutes left. Any other questions from the audience? Don't be shy. Any other comments from the panelists?
I
Go
can
ahead,
maybe
Elisabeth.
talk a bit more about how digital twinning is being used in the Maritime. Hopefully someone will step up with another question, because it's always nice to hear from the audience. But terminal operators are using digital twinning to look at reducing emissions from large ships idling in harbors here in our coastal areas, which enables them, when they're looking at ships estimating their arrival time coming into port, to do what they call just-in-time arrival. So it means when the ship is leaving Hong Kong or somewhere and it's coming to our continent, to the Port of Vancouver, Port of Prince Rupert, they're able to estimate through the digital models, when the berthing space will become available based on ships that are currently there, what speed they need to come to get there. They're looking at the weather the ship will encounter, all this sort of thing. So it's a really great and useful tool in that regard, to take quite a complex situation and make it into an opportunity to reduce emissions.
Okay, so I don't see any other questions. I think I'll just wrap it up and thank the panelists for their insights today. And I think we really get a clear understanding of just how important, just from their experience, how important the network effect is, both local and global networks, and how we can leverage those. But also in the local ecosystem here, the importance of strategic partnerships, and I would call it, massive collaboration at this point is what's really needed for whatever's left in the competitive spirits, or companies trying to protect IP, or we have to put all of those things down if we have any chance of trying to hit our 2030 targets, our Paris targets, let alone getting on the right pathway to 2050. So. Thanks for all of your insights, and let's give it up, a round of applause for our four panelists.